Hello, today's video is called I was 50 feet away from the horses when people were trampled. Today was day 15 of the public inquiry to the federal government for invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. Today is November 2, 2022. The agenda for today is overview, key details, today's witnesses, and my point of view. We are reviewing the summary of the testimonies in the inquiry that seeks to understand if Justin Castro had enough reasons to invoke the Emergency Act on February 14 of this year, and also if the powers that he used were exceeding the scope that was granted by the Act. Based on these findings, the lead commissioner is going to put forward a recommendation in both English and French by February of next year. Remember, this is not a trial, it's an inquiry. All my material and my videos are available on YouTube, Lisa Proust Research, as well as my own website, lisaproustresearch.com. And here is the link where you can actually find all the live feeds and also all the previous days in this inquiry. Some key details that I like to share before starting, just to help you understand and navigate through a lot of short forms, the different jurisdictions that were interacting in the ground, a quick timeline, some key locations, and the list of the requirements to invoke the Emergency Act. Today, witnesses started at 9:30 a.m. and we went up to 6:15 p.m. and we had 3 key witnesses, all directly involved with the operations on the ground. The first witness was the convoy counselor Keith Wilson, and in the direct examination, he was going through all the details of how he got involved, and everybody had, obviously, in the ground, a personal reason as to why they end up involved in this movement. He was approached by some people after the convoy was already in Ottawa, and he flew in to help them because his wife, who is a nurse, as well as himself, were concerned with the situation and the abuse as a result of the different mandates. He arrived there in a private small plane, and obviously they made a big fuss out of that. Who paid for that and why were you there and so on, because obviously they were able to bypass the mandates and allow people who were not injected to get into that plane. From the beginning, he's going to talk about the fact that it was not a unified group. If anything, the biggest lesson you can extrapolate from hearing all these witnesses, both from the police perspective as well as the convoy, is the fact that without a proper structure and a uniform line of command and a clear demarcation of roles, chaos will happen, not only in regular times, but most importantly when there is a rush or an emergency, such as in these cases. So clearly the lack of structure, both from the convoy perspective and the police, was not helpful and created all this chaos that definitely helped with the invocation of the act. Here there was a presentation of a video on which he presented Tamara Lynch as the person who sparked the whole movement, and eventually there would be a problem because obviously we now know that it was Brigitte, and then Tamara was supposed to just be in charge of the GoFundMe and raising the funds, and she did an amazing job. But obviously you can start to see how the lack of clear roles started to create a competition of egos, miscommunications, and also a need for be recognized in the proper manner. They were talking about the fact that there was no unlawful assembly. Remember, this is a very important lawyer, so obviously he understands that from the legal perspective, the citizens who were there were exercising the right for a peaceful protest. He mentioned the fact that the groups were gathered in perhaps different avenues and motives, and he pointed reasons such as make their own perspective more successful, perhaps reshape the whole context of the convoy to make it their own movement, and some of them may have had some financial objectives or reaching that fund of GoFundMe that at certain point in time was announced as over $10 million. So multiple reasons and motives as to why people were trying to get a hold of this. He contradicted the previous statement from one of the police officers, Drummond, saying about his meeting with Steve K, on which he was part of, as well as Tom Marazzo, that is the second witness today. And he clarified that during this conversation with the city of Ottawa, Steve K is the manager of the city of Ottawa. In that meeting, it was clear that even though the focus was to try to relieve the chaos and the different amount of trucks in the locations, obviously there was a focus on real suspects. And he actually went there, and he realized that it was difficult to coordinate a move, but at the same time, he didn't find them to be difficult overall. He just noticed that they were a combination of, in the very front, Polish immigrants. And also there were some people who didn't speak English, because that's the location where the French people were also mostly centered, and also people who would speak English and French. So obviously there was a bad feeling, because everybody remembers from February 6th. This is February 8 when he actually went to the location. On February 6 is the infamous incident when the police officers from PLT told the group of protesters to move the gas to another place. They went to downtown and they were arrested. So we want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then they posted a couple of videos. In one of those, you can see the images of the PLT here moving across in the middle of the night with masks. And you can imagine how it's difficult to try to move these trucks, because obviously it was Tamara in charge of moving the signs. You can imagine if a police officer starts to move the signs, it would create a very negative reaction. And even moving the trucks was complicated. I mean, these are heavy machines and there's a lot of people around. A little bit about the evolution of the reasons why people would stay longer than originally anticipated. Many people just originally wanted to stay perhaps for a few days, but as they arrived, either they got a little bit into the mood of being supported by more people, and most importantly, they felt that they were also representing other people's needs. So they became a little bit more interested in staying any longer. But there was definitely a lot of expansion in that original thought of staying for a few days. Here you can see how he's saying, I am a Canadian and I never imagined the federal government would use that level of force against not violent, peaceful Canadians. And it's regarding the fact that he appeared on a video on February 17 saying to the protesters as well as the open public, you can still come and support us because there's nothing unlawful about these protests. So obviously this created a lot of issues, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. When the counselor for the government of Canada asked him if he thought that hate speech was an issue, he said, yes, absolutely is an issue and is wrong. And I feel the Prime Minister hate speech deeply troubling. So I am certain that everyone who's listening to this video have heard these awful words that were said by the Prime Minister of Canada. So obviously, if you don't see that this is hate speech, obviously you are very biased. So they were talking about the fact that Antifa showed up into this protest, and the only 3 charges were done to these people. For those of you who don't understand how Antifa works and who hires them and how they are coordinated, I invite you to do some research, because clearly these people were not stemming from the convoy. Funds were frozen. Everybody that was a witness today had their funds frozen, some people more than others. The last one has been for 9 months and he has not been given his money back, which is absolutely troubling to me. And then here they said, as usual, the lead counselor is asking the lawyer, were you ever offered a place where you would be able to be exercising your rightful way of protesting? And he said no. And they said, oh, so you didn't ask and they didn't offer? And the answer was correct. The second witness was Tom Marazzo. Everybody must remember him. He comes across in a lot of the police officers' communications. He was an ex-military and he became involved doing all the logistics and the truck removals based on his experience with his past professional life. And he was extremely organized, and he expressed a ability that he had based on his experience to make sure that he could organize things and he could understand how they needed this role because they were not organized. So here we're talking about the reason why he got involved, and he said, I was afraid of the police, which I have never been. Remember, this 25 years in military, there's no reason why this gentleman should be feeling any fear. But he said, I was moving from feeling fear to I'm not afraid anymore. I want the fines. So he became active as a result of feeling these type of restrictions. He was an injected at the time, and he was fired from his, he was a teacher at the time, and he was fired because he didn't get the injection. So you can see here how Brigitte in this first meeting was very vocal about her position of what are you going to do? We need to talk to somebody, and if not, what are you going to do? You're going to make us disappear? I sort of understand. I mean, everybody's frustrated, and it's easy for us in the comfort of our home saying, oh, those awful people saying these awful things. But when you have nothing to lose, I was born in Colombia. I have seen people acting because they have nothing to lose. And in Canada, we haven't seen it yet, but if they keep on oppressing us, it's going to come to a moment that a lot of people will have nothing to lose. And what is very sad throughout these testimonies is that every time you try to express the fact that you are oppressing us, you are spending money, giving it to other countries, giving it to causes that have nothing to do with us. We pay taxes. I pay taxes. Every time I go grocery shopping, I have to pay taxes just like you do. So where is this money going to? And all these people are rightfully saying in our behalf, and I fully supported them, and I wish I would have done more for them, is, well, where are my rights? And here the commission councillor was talking about exactly that. Some people stayed because they had nothing to go back to. So I invite everyone who's listening to me to just take a pause and understand that a lot of people act because they're really desperate and they have nothing to lose, nothing to go back to. Here they were talking about the memorandum of understanding. There was a document that was prepared by an independent group, and then obviously Tom and some other people denounced this because apparently, and I didn't go into details of what the document is, but apparently it's something like an intent of removal of the government based on bases that are not fully legal. So again, it's just something to note. Here, at the beginning on the video on February 7, there was a video that he was here expressing himself, and because he was on the front row, he was confused as to be one spokesperson. So on February 10, he clarified the confusion, and then he sort of became the spokesperson because by February 18 and 19, he said all of the people that I knew were already gone or they were incarcerated. So he was talking about the fact that the Prime Minister never got the message of we need to talk to you about our rights. Understanding the pressure and the need to remove it from the Chief of Police, I think he was the only person who was clearly understanding the big picture of we need to start to get going and release some pressure because the board, Diane Deans, was exercising pressure on ex-chief of police slowly, and obviously it was not going to go into any positive ground. Here, there was a video that was shown by the government of Canada, which he acknowledged a gentleman called Jeremy Mackenzie. I never heard of this gentleman until today, but he, I'm going to do a little bit of visuals for you. And he said, listen, there's a gentleman who did this. He's an ex-military as well. He created a little flag that is just a line called Diagolon, and he said that there is it's a story of it's a country where a VP has a time travel cocaine addicted goat. So obviously makes no sense. It's just a joke. And then he said that there were videos of some MPs saying that this was the reason why they invoked the act. And obviously the minute you get the propaganda media involved, they create these extremely harsh labels across the whole thing. So this is a map of the infamous Diagolon. I'm sure that I'm mispronouncing that. And sadly, if you say anything that is misaligned with the government, then the propaganda of the news are going to tell you that you're an extremist. So It's pretty concerning, actually, and I'm going to talk about this in my last slide, because the state of Canada, on which you cannot even say a lot of things, is really complicated. Then it was the turn for the Ottawa and the Business Coalition councillor. He was very frustrated today when Tom was talking, and Tom was a very good witness. He was direct, he was clear, he was concise, and he was cooperating with the line of questioning, and he even was very frustrated with him, and I'm not even sure as to why. He was saying, listen, all the lanes were open. Well, they were not open, he would say. Well, they were open. So very frustrated, and obviously, in my opinion, all this miscommunication is not necessarily always chaos. Maybe there's some ill intent as well. Here, the Ottawa police was talking about the fact that these pamphlets were released on February 17, telling people it's time to go home, or we're going to start to arrest you and seize your vehicle and remove your driver's license, get rid of your insurance, etc. So the fact that these papers didn't even have a signature and didn't have a seal from the police officers obviously created a lot of doubt on all the organizers. And then Tom Marasso says, I saw it in an elevator. And then the next witness is going to say the fact that it didn't have any kind of seal obviously didn't make any sense to many people. So here they were talking about the jokes that were, I'm talking about Tom Marasso. He was talking about the jokes that the RCMP were doing about the, quote, boots on the ground and things like that. So some visuals that you can see how comfortable were the police officers, which actually, to be perfectly honest, it annoys me, because it was very cold for the truckers, and it just shows something that is unrealistic. Actually, I was there. I saw police officers freezing on the ground. So not everybody was here having a great time, but it's just these images are disturbing because it shows something that irritates people. And then you can see here how when they're sharing the video of the citizens being trampled by the horses, then there was this leaked text of some, I don't know if it was RCMP or PP or PS, whomever was just saying, wow, that's awesome. So just really, really bad. And here, that's what we need to do. And very bad, really bad. All his accounts were frozen. Here, in the direct examination by the Citizens for Freedom Convoy, then they say that it was really shocking to me. They didn't use the emergency management in Ontario to manage the pandemic. So I didn't know this, actually. He said there is an institution in each province to manage this type of emergencies. And he said that when they didn't use the structure that is designed to help the government and the citizens, then he knew something was wrong. And then he started to see bizarre things that actually shut down department stores, stopped selling certain kits, and I don't know if you remember, Walmarts and dollar stores, and every single store that was still open, they had sections closed, which makes absolutely no sense. I remember going to a dollar store and I could buy black plastic cups, but not pink plastic cups. I mean, we all saw this type of contradiction. So how do you expect people just to not even raise your concern as what is the logic of it? And obviously he's talking about the fact that it creates anxiety and fear in a lot of people, and they started to arrest people for the most bizarre things. I don't know if you saw this video of a very young boy who's playing hockey, I think it's in Alberta, and they either they threaten to tase him or they tase him. So again, I don't know what you expect from regular people like you and I. Do you want us to lay down and let us beat us? Some of us may say, I don't think so. So it's very tough. The Prime Minister, my words, not his, was acting as he was a king. And I agree with that. His expressions, words, his body language, everything about the Prime Minister of this country is very disturbing. Full disconnection, keeps on spending. I don't know how much money he spent when he went to England to a funeral of the entity called Elizabeth. Money that is just unreal. the chateau apparently has like, I don't know, like $20,000 per month in groceries. Like, why? Why we have so many people struggling? What is going on with our taxes? So I understand, and I actually shared that statement. And then here, all the line of question is trying to prove that there were connections between the different convoys. Very interesting, because it's almost like they have this conspiracy theory that every single one of the convoys was in contact with each other, which over and over they ask the same question, and the answer is no, they were not in contact, and they were actually, as they say, their hands were full with their own operation locally. Here, when it was time for the third witness, Pat King, that is perhaps the most interesting and controversial of all of them, because all of the other people had already placed statements during the convoy to separate themselves from him, because there were some old videos that were used by, obviously, the propaganda machine of this country to badmouth him and say that he was threatening the prime minister and things like that, with all videos that were unrelated to the convoy. So everybody was removing themselves from him. I really felt for him. I really did. He was talking about his beginnings and how he was very interesting life, and then he became a truck driver, and now he said he's charged with criminal offenses, and my bail includes, I have been removed my freedom of speech, my freedom to protest, I can't do anything, all my rights have been stripped from me. So pretty sad. We're in Canada. This shouldn't be the case. He should have the right for a very quick trial. If he's such a dangerous person, then why is he free? And if he's not so dangerous, then let him speak. If he's so crazy, what is the problem? So clearly a lot of repression in this country. He was in contact with the police from the beginning, because he had already organized in 2019 another convoy, which was very successful. So obviously he was all the time trying to be respectful and following the law at all point in time. And he was joining from the west. He joined the convoy in Calgary. He was going to be presented with some videos, and he said, I have been harassed and defamed by a certain group of people, that they edit my videos and they cut and splice, I think that's the word, 10 seconds here and there, and then they blow it out of proportion. And he said, I've been waiting for years to tell you how these videos are. So then we're going to see in a minute how, when they present it, he actually go piece by piece and say, this is from this year, this is from other podcasts, etc. So I'm sure that if you grab all my videos and then you cut and paste, you can get the most outrageous phrases that in context, without context, will appear that I'm completely against something, or that I'm completely demented, or that I'm completely dangerous. So very interesting how the minute you follow anything that the traditional media says, you are going to be very likely deceived and confused. Here, the same situation that we're talking, the paperwork that was released by the police officers without the logos and without any signature was obviously creating confusion in these truckers. And here, very interesting. Everybody knows what he's talking about. This I have spoken about having an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, between a certain minor and he obviously didn't say prime minister, and certain member of the parliament, the invasion of Chinese soldiers in Canada soil, money stolen from Alberta, and he kept on saying things that we all talk about, but he obviously was given the stage to talk about this. So I found that very interesting. And then the OPS had edited his videos, and then he dissected the portion, saying, listen, this is taken out of context, this is from a podcast, etc. And then he said that his accounts have been frozen for 9 months, and that he raised, apparently, this was told to him, to Pat, by the Ottawa and Business Coalition counselor. He said, well, you raised $100,000. And then there was, I don't know, somebody started to yell in the court, or clap perhaps, and then the lead counselor got really, I don't think he got mad, but he was firm and say, I will ask you to be removed. And obviously he's trying to keep this peaceful, he's trying to keep this ordered, but the emotions run high. Pat King is a very passionate individual, so obviously he attracts a lot of passion, and there's a lot of feelings surrounding this convoy. So obviously it was very tough for everyone. And then he said, I would never call him Mr., but that's what he said, Mr. This entity sent 2,000 anti-protesters to come and slash our tires. And I think he was talking in the context of the 2019 convoy. But you can see how, sadly, in this country right now, every time you try to talk, is not allowed. You have to just lay down and then let the government do as they please. And certain individuals are not able to do that because they have either a little bit of integrity or they are already, as I was sharing, with nothing to lose. Here, very interesting, I don't know if you remember, on February 6th is when there was a miscommunication between the PLT that had negotiated for the people from Coventry Road to remove the fuel from that place to be less, quote, dangerous. And then when the protesters moved the fuel, they moved it to downtown and they were arrested. So the RCMP approached him the next morning on Monday, February 7, and he said, listen, I hope you're okay with what happened last night. We apologize. We didn't want to get involved. We approached our lawyer and our counselor told us there was no legal grounds to arrest anyone. So we didn't want to arrest anyone. And now we don't want to break the law. So we're going to be going to Windsor. So this is a prime example of just looking for anything just to create a story and just make a problem. So the counselor for the Ottawa residents and businesses said, oh, so you were in contact with the Windsor convoy? Out of nowhere, all he said, Pat King, is, listen, RCMP approached me and said, I don't want to break the law. We're going to Ottawa. And now this counselor is just spinning the wheels and creating a story that was completely unfounded. So obviously Pat King said, no, that's not what I said. And then he was called for time, and then he got mad, and he said, and I'm talking about the counselor, he said, well, I don't use this word, I dislike it, but I have to use it because that's what he said. These folks have been given a week to talk about all they want, and now we have been given even a few minutes. So there was a little bit of yelling, there was a break, and then they removed, everybody apologized, he apologized to the lead counselor, and then in the end, the lead counselor said, any more questions for cross-examination or anything? Nobody asked questions, which is interesting, not even the convoy counselors. So Pat King said, may I please say something? I understand that the city felt we were bad. We're not bad. We're nice. We're good people. We are just proud Canadians. So the lead counselor was kind enough to let him talk. And then he said, if there's any consolation, there has been evidence of good people and more are still to come. And that was the end of that. I don't even know how to score these people. I only have respect for all of them, deep respect. I'm sure that they are not perfect. I'm sure that they did things and they have done things and they will continue to do things that are less than ideal. But at the same time, the fact that they stood for each one of us and they helped to raise awareness to the government and to the world that Canada is in a very troublesome position, I only have deep respect. You only take action because you feel fear or because you feel passion. And when you feel passion, like all these people, and I feel passionate about this as well, you seek a way to express myself. I am so tiny. I have very few, I don't even have 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I have now less than 1,000 subscribers on Twitter. I'm very tiny. And I have been banned 3 times already. Why? Because I say things against what the government propaganda wants me to say. So I will keep on talking in my little channels until Bill 11 comes, because once that Bill 11 that is on its way to be approved, it has already passed 2 rounds in the cabinet. So once it's approved, then I'm done. I can't talk anymore. So I appreciate every single one of you who listens to what I have to say, and I invite everyone to continue believing that it is our duty to stand on our own, and believe that we are human beings that deserve all type of respect and we have rights. Thank you very much for listening.